Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the organization committee of the summit for giving me this opportunity to talk to you today about the global burden of smoking and what we have achieved so far. Substantially global efforts has been devoted to curtailing the tobacco epidemic over the past 2 decades, especially after the adoption of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control by the World Health Organization in 2003. In 2015, in recognition of the burden resulting from tobacco use, strengthened tobacco control was included as a global development target in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Latest global data finds nearly 8 million deaths from smoking in 2019 and 90% of new smokers addicted by age 25. It is irrefutable that the tobacco epidemic remains an important public health concern, and it is of the utmost importance to ending this global public health issue as soon as possible. During the first part of my presentation, I will try to give you an overview of the prevalence of smoking tobacco use globally and highlight the evolution of the epidemic the last 30 years. In the second part, we will discuss the effects of tobacco control policies on global smoking prevalence the last 30 years from 1990 to 2019 and the obtained results of the implementation of these policies. A few months ago, in June 2021, the Lancet published data from smoking use prevalence based on the analysis of the Global Burden of Disease Study 2019, including data from 204 countries and territories. These countries and territories were nested in 21 aggregate regions and 7 aggregate super regions. Standard regions and super regions in the GBD are defined based on a combination of epidemiologic patterns and spatial distance. According to this data, globally, the number of current smokers in 2019 was 1.14 billion. Age standardized prevalence of current use of smoking tobacco among individuals aged 15 years and older was 32.7% among males, with highest prevalence in Asia and Oceania, and 6.62% among females, highest prevalence in Europe and Oceania, of course, with tremendous differences of smoking prevalence between the different countries. For instance, the lowest prevalence among males aged 15 years and older was 7.33% in Peru, and the highest was 64.6% in Timor-Leste. Again, among females aged 15 years and older, the lowest prevalence was almost 0.7% in Eritrea, and the highest was 42.3% in Greenland. According to the data analysis, smoking prevalence exceeded 20% among males in 151 countries and among females in 42 countries. Among the 159 countries with a population exceeding 1 million, the highest prevalence of smoking tobacco use in male was observed in Timor-Leste, Indonesia, Armenia, Jordan, and Georgia, when the highest prevalence of smoking tobacco use among females observed in Serbia, Chile, Croatia, Bulgaria, and Greece. As stated by these findings of the study, there is a concrete evidence that in Greece we have a lot to do about smoking cessation. The 10 countries with the largest number of tobacco smokers in 2019 were China, India, Indonesia, the USA, Russia, Bangladesh, Japan, Turkey, Vietnam, and the Philippines, and together comprising nearly 2/3 of the global tobacco smoking population. I want to stress that 341 million tobacco smokers, corresponding approximately to 30% of the total number of tobacco users worldwide, lived in China in 2019. Since 1999, global age standardized prevalence of smoking tobacco use among males aged 15 years and older decreased by 27.5% and among females decreased by 37.7%, with variable progress across countries. Prevalence of smoking tobacco use among males decreased significantly between 1990 and 2019 in 135 countries, but decreased significantly among females in only 68 countries. The largest decreases were observed in Brazil, where prevalence decreased by 72.5% among males and by 74.7% among females. Across both sexes combined, the largest decreases in age standardized prevalence of smoking tobacco use were observed in Brazil, Norway, Senegal, Iceland, Denmark, and Haiti. In the opposite, prevalence of smoking tobacco use increased significantly over the past 30 years in 20 countries for males and 12 countries for females. In Afghanistan, for example, the prevalence was increased by 179% among males and 205% among females. Another important point that needs to be taken into consideration is the rate of the fluctuation of the smoking prevalence during this 30 years period. According to the analysis of the annualized rate of change per 5 years period in individuals aged 15 years and older again, between 1990 and 2019, the largest number of countries had their fastest decrease in age standardized prevalence of smoking tobacco use between 2005 and 2009 for both males in 68 countries and females in 56 countries. Overall, for males, a percentage of 56% corresponding to 115 out of 204 countries, and for females, a percentage of 67% corresponding to 136 countries, had their fastest decrease after the World Health Organization Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, which was ratified after 2005. Notably, decreases in prevalence were smaller in the period 2015-2019 than in the period 2010-2015 in 152 countries for males and 137 countries for females. These slides show the evolution of the rate of change in number of tobacco smokers by 5 years intervals. Both lines show regional averages and thin lines show country-level changes. Important differences of the rate of change were observed between regions, independently their geographical position, their continent, or their economic situation. In the top left corner, we can see the rate of change in number of tobacco smokers globally throughout the 30 years, and in the bottom left corner, the rate of change of the age standardized prevalence of smoking tobacco use. In many countries, reduction in prevalence have not kept pace with population growth. As a result, the number of smokers globally has increased steadily each year since 1990, when there were 0.99 billion smokers globally, with the exception of the period between 2011 and 2017, during which no significant change in the number of smokers occurred. Of 204 countries and territories included in the analysis, 113 had a significant increase in the number of current smokers between 1990 and 2019, and 111 had a significant increase between 2005 and 2019. Among both males and females, the super region with the largest relative increases in the number of smokers since 1990 were North Africa and the Middle East, with an increase of 104.1%, and Sub-Saharan Africa with an increase of 74.6%. The largest relative decreases in the number of smokers were observed in the Latin America and the Caribbean, 19.8%, and the high-income superregion, 17.6%. Today, the direct relationship between number of cigarettes smoked per time unit and risk outcome is very well documented. The estimation of exposure of smokers for the non-cigarette smoked tobacco products is qualified as cigarette equivalents on the basis of the weight of tobacco. Conforming to the above, 7.41 trillion cigarettes equivalents of tobacco were consumed in 2019, accounting to 20.3 billion cigarette equivalents consumed each day worldwide. China accounted for more than a third of the world's tobacco consumption with 2.72 trillion cigarette equivalents. Countries with the highest consumption per person in 2019 were mostly in Europe, with Montenegro, North Macedonia, Bulgaria, Slovenia, and again Greece, all having consumption exceeding 2,350 cigarettes equivalents per person. Countries with the lowest consumption per person were mostly in the sub-Saharan Africa. Cigarettes smoked per day is an important predictor of disease risk, although smokers who consumed only a few cigarettes each day will have considerable excess risk compared with non-smokers. Among 719 million male current smokers aged 30 years and older in 2019, 11.6 smoked 1 to 4 cigarette equivalent per day, 19.4 smoked 5 to 9, 20% smoked 10 to 14, 16.8 smoked 15 to 19, when 32.3 smoked 20 or more cigarette equivalents per day. Among 146 million female current smokers aged 30 years and older in 2019, 18.5 smoked 1 to 4, 26.7 smoked 5 to 9, 22.1 smoked 10 to 14, 42.2% smoked 15 to 19 cigarettes, and a percentage of 18.5% smoked 20 or more cigarette equivalents per day. In other words, the majority of male smokers at a percentage of 32.3 watts smoked more than 20 cigarettes per day, in contrast with the majority of female smokers who at a percentage of 27% smoked 5 to 9 cigarettes per day. The distribution of cigarette equivalents per smoker per day varies also across countries. Most of the male current smoker population aged 30 years and older in 72 countries, and most of the female current smoker population in 121 countries smoke fewer than 10 cigarette equivalents per day on average. Now, if we have a closer look of the number of deaths and disability-adjusted life years that provoke smoking globally, we will see that only for 2019, 7.69 million deaths and 200 million deaths were attributable to smoking tobacco use, accounting for 13.6% of all deaths and 7.89% of all deaths. 6.18 million, corresponding to 80% of these deaths, were among males, and smoking accounted for the largest number and proportion, 20.2% of death among males of the 87 risk factor included in the Global Burden of Disease study for 2019. Among females, smoking accounted for 1.51 million deaths and 5.84% of all deaths. Of the 36 health outcomes caused by smoking tobacco use, the health outcomes with the largest number of deaths attributable to smoking tobacco use for both sexes combined in 2019 were ischemic heart disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, tracheal, bronchus, and lung cancer, and stroke, which together accounted for approximately 72% of all deaths attributable to smoking tobacco use that year. Top causes of death attributable to smoking varied by region, reflecting differences in both background, cause-specific death rates, and pattern of smoking. Ischemic heart disease was the leading cause of death due to smoking tobacco use in all superregions except the high-income superregion, for which the leading cause was lung cancer, and for countries in the Southeast Asia, East Asia, Oceania, superregion for which the leading cause was chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. An estimate of 5.96 million corresponding to 77.5% of 7.69 million deaths attributable to smoking tobacco use occurred in low-income and middle-income countries in 2019. Ukraine had the highest death rate from smoking among males with 487 per 100,000 males. Countries with high rates of deaths among male smokers were predominantly in the Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and East Asia regions. Among female smokers, 4 locations had rates of death higher than 180 per 100,000 females, and they are Denmark, Montenegro, Serbia, and Greenland. Across all age groups, smoking tobacco use was the cause of more than 20% of all May deaths in 73 countries in 2019, and among females, smoking accounted for more than 20% of death in only 2 locations, Denmark and Greenland, due to both lower smoking prevalence, shorter duration of smoking, and lower smoking intensity among females than among males. This slide shows the global smoking attributable deaths numbers percent rate per 100,000 by 5-year age group for both sexes combined in 2019. The proportion of death attributable to smoking tobacco use increased with age, peaking among those aged 60 to 64 years, 22% of death, before decreasing in all the age groups. On the left, we can see the number of deaths in absolute number, where in the middle are presented the corresponding percentages. As already mentioned, the deaths were grouped by 5 years age group, starting of the age of 30. In summing up, in 2019, more than 1 billion people smoked tobacco regularly, and almost 8 million deaths were attributable to smoking. Smoking tobacco use accounted for 20.2% of all-cause death among males and was the leading risk factor for both deaths and DALYs among males. Among females, smoking tobacco use accounted for approximately 0.8% of all deaths due to lower prevalence, shorter duration, and lower intensity of smoking than in males. Tobacco control has contributed to reductions in global prevalence of smoking tobacco use of 27.5% for males and 37.7% for females. However, these global aggregates do not illustrate important between countries heterogeneity. Between 1990 and 2019, significant decreases in prevalence of smoking tobacco use were observed in 135 countries for males and 68 countries for females, while significant increases were observed in 20 countries for males and 12 countries for females. Although tobacco control effort began as early as in the 1960s, in some countries, after the detrimental health effect of tobacco smoking were first documented, global progress in tobacco control was catalyzed by the passing of the WHO FCTC in 2005. The decade following the introduction of the WHO FCTC was the period of fastest decrease in the prevalence of smoking tobacco use across the largest number of countries. The effectiveness of the demand reduction policies outlined in the FCTC articles has been documented, and the large reduction in prevalence of smoking tobacco use between 1990 and 2019 were observed in many countries, as we mentioned before, and show the potential of this tool to operate in diverse contexts to greatly reduce the prevalence of smoking tobacco use, and save millions of lives over the coming decades. Despite these successes, in several countries with large population and high prevalence of smoking tobacco use, including China, little to no progress has been made in reducing the prevalence of smoking. Most countries did not have sufficient decreases in the prevalence of smoking to offset the demographic force of population growth, resulting in constant increasing numbers of smokers over time. And in many countries, including those that had large decreases in prevalence previously, the rate of progress has slowed, particularly in the past 5 years. 113 out of 204 countries and territories had a significant increase in the number of smokers since 1990, and 111 countries had a significant increase since 2005. To achieve the goal set forth in the SDGs and WHO Global Non-Communicable Disease Monitoring Framework, most countries will need stronger tobacco control policies than those already in place. As of 2018, only 62 countries had comprehensive smoke-free policies. 23 offered the full range of cessation support services recommended by WHO, 91 mandated best practice pictorial health warnings, 48 were protected by completed advertising, promotion, and sponsorship bans, and 38 had the recommended level of tobacco taxation. In conclusion, closing gap in the adoption, implementation, and enforcement of evidence-based demand reduction policies is vital to ending the global health tobacco epidemic. Thank you very much.